Hello and welcome back to our tutorial. So in this tutorial what we're going to do is we're going to work on two things. We're going to look at non-player characters and we're going to look at rates of fire for them, and we're also going to look at how to trigger that non-player character firing, and we're going to use a little calculation to work out distance between objects. So the first thing is we're going to kind of build on what we had last week. So we had a script here, so let's just open this up. This is our player control script, and this script allowed us to press a button, press a key, which was, I think we used the F key, and we'll see now, and it instantiated, it loaded in a prefab. On that prefab, so here we go here, yeah, we pressed the F key, so let's zoom in a little bit on that. So we put this in here, this F key, and it instantiated a bullet, and then it gave the bullet we give it a force, so we fired it and we told it where to instantiate. So I'm going to reuse this piece of code here, only on a non-player character. So let's do that. So first of all, we need to make our non-player character. So just for convenience and simplicity, we'll do that here we'll go add 2D object sprite, and then if you remember we did this before, we clicked on our circle here and all the way to the bottom and we picked background. So this is our sprite here, so we will move the sprite. I'm actually going to get rid of these two platforms. They have served their purpose well. We can add them back in later. So here's my new sprite, and I'm going to scale it up here a little bit, so by 2 and by 2. So this is going to be my bad guy, and we'll give it a little bit of physics. So we'll add a physics 2D box collider, and we're going to call this non-player character 1. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to duplicate it, and we'll just call this 2, and we're going to drop this inside here. So this is basically the same object. These are going to be our bad guy. Now, like before, we want an empty to fire from, so I'm going to create an empty and place it here, and we'll call this NPC fire. So that's where we're going to fire from towards our character. Now, as before, last time we made a bullet, so let's have a look at this bullet. So this bullet has a sprite, that's fine, it's a circle. It has a circle collider, has a 2D rigid body, and it has a bullet script, which basically says to end the bullet after 2 seconds. So we're going to reuse this bullet. Now, you may in another version of this, or as we progress through building this game, we may end up making a separate bullet for the bad guys. In fact, we definitely will. But for now, just for convenience, we'll leave it like that. Okay, so now we need to control this. So let's make a new script. So we're going to go create C# script, and we're going to call this non-player character 1 control. Okay, so this is our script, and we're going to open that up in MonoDevelop. So this is our script here. So now we have to ask ourselves what we want to do with this non-player character. So what are we trying to achieve, and what are we trying to get the character to do? Well, we want it to fire, and we want it to fire when there is within a certain range. So there's kind of two separate things we want to do. We want to get it to, so we want to work out how to get it to fire. So the rate of fire, we have already looked at the firing instruction. But how do we set up a rate of fire? So basically what we want to set up is a clock. So we want to set up a clock that says, after a certain amount of time passes, fire, and then reset the clock, and after a certain amount of time passes again, fire again. So let's work on that. So the first thing we need to do is, as we did here, we had a a variable that was a bullet. So we'll copy that and bring that in here. So we have a rigid body. So we have a bullet that we need to fire. And we also, if you remember, had we fired from this point here, firing point, F point, and that was a transform. So let's bring that in as well. So we need to have a place where we're going to fire from. So kind of we establish both of them. And then after that, what we want is a rate of fire. So we're going to say public, because we want to be able to change this in the inspector, and we'll call this fire rate, but we want it to be a float. Okay. So, and we want this to equal, let's say, 3 seconds. Okay. So now we have a float that is defined as 3 seconds, and we can, as I said, change this in the inspector if we want to make the game harder or easier. This will be our fire rate. Now we also need another variable, and we'll just put that in here. We'll call this we're going to make this public. Normally you wouldn't, but I'll make this public now. It's also a float, and we'll call this last fire. Okay, and that's equal to no time. So basically this is like sort of resetting our clock. So we would normally make that private because we don't want to change this, but I'm going to make it public so you can see it in the inspector. Okay, so when the script starts, we want to set last fire equal to 0. Actually, not to 0, we want to set it to equal time. So we're going to say, so last fire equals time. So now what do we need to do? So we're going to go into update. So we need to, this needs to run every frame. So we're going to say if time is bigger than, so if the actual time in the game is bigger than, so last fire, this one here, plus our rate of fire. Okay, so that's our if statement. We'll open up our curly brackets. So let's have a little think about that. So we're going to say if time, so this is basically real time. So if that equals this, or sorry, if time is bigger than time plus the fire rate, then fire. Now we're going to have to reset this in a second. So basically every time we fire, we're going to reset what this number is. So how do we do that? Well, we need to kind of make another function or another piece that's executable. Otherwise we won't ever be able to define as in now is a time, because this will constantly be updating. So we're going to say fire. So we're going to create, no, not fire rate, fire. So we're going to create a function called fire. So let's do that. We'll go void fire. So now we get to, and we'll make it public. Oops. So now we get to define what this is. Okay. I see. I'm getting an error here because I haven't closed. So this bracket here closes this one. I need to have another bracket here. So that closes that one, and then we have one too many brackets. So cool. So basically, when time is bigger than this number and this number, run this function. And now we get to define what that function is. And that function is firing. And we have, we put that in here. So let's go in here and see if we can copy this. So Control C and Control V. Now we haven't defined bullet speed, so let's go do that. So up here we have our bullet speed as a variable, and let's put that in here. So now we're saying that when this number added to that number is bigger than this number, fire. But what we need to do, and this is the important bit, is we need to redefine this. So last fire equals time.time. Okay. So let's just kind of work our way through this. So let's say I fire once. Right? So after I've fired, after it's ran this line of code and this line of code, it's going to make this number here equal to time. So let's say 20 seconds has elapsed in the game. So this is now equal to 20. Our rate of fire is 3, so this becomes 20 plus 3. So when time is bigger than 20 plus 3, it'll fire. So when will time be bigger than 20 plus 3? Well, maybe when it's 23 and a bit. So let's just, for ease of computation, say 24. So when it's 24, it'll fire. And then it'll run these two lines of code, and then it'll get here, and now last fire will equal this number, which is 24. So then 24 plus 3 is 27. So when this is bigger than 27, it'll fire. It'll reset it to 27, and it goes on and on. So it's a little sort of this is like a coroutine. So it's like this number is being plugged back in here so that we can get a rate of fire. So it's quite simple, but also allows us to have quite a detailed kind of control of when this thing happens. So what else do we need to do? So the other thing we said we'd try and do is work on distance. So so let's do that. So what we need is another one of these. So let's make one of these. So this is another variable. It's going to be a moving object, and we'll call this player. Okay. So the player now is an object that we're going to track. And in update here, what we're going to do is we're going to say that we have a float, and that is we'll call this dist for distance. So this float, this variable down here that we're going to create in our update, equals so it equals my position. So transform dot position dot x. So I'm going to try and calculate my position on x. So this is going to work horizontally. So float equal, or this distance float equals so my transform dot position dot x minus the player. So we've set that as a variable player. It's transform dot position dot x. Okay, so this is a number, and it's a number when you take this from this. Now we can now use that number. So we can say if the rate of fire is correct, and then in here we can say and that's how you say and in a statement like this. You have to put it in twice, and we'll say and if distance is smaller than, and then we should probably call this range. Now we haven't put in a range. So let's do that up here. So our range is going to be a float. So let's put it in here. So Control C, Control V. So we're going to make this range. Okay, and we've given it a range of 3. So let's give it a range of 10. So if our time is correct and our distance is smaller than 10, then fire. So let's save that and jump back into Unity and see if we get any compile errors. We don't. Fantastic. Or at least not yet. No, looks good. So I'm going to take this non-player character script and place it here on my non-player character. And it's going to ask me for a few things. So it's going to ask me for the bullet. So we, as before, we drag and drop the bullet in here. It's going to ask me for the firing point. And we'd said we're going to fire from here. And then it says the player. So where is this player that we're going to track the distance to? That's the player there. Now, let's press play and see what we get. Now, let's see if I... Oh, so I'm firing. Oh, I'm still firing. Now, there is a problem with my firing script because we just copied and pasted what we were doing. So we've said add a force vector2.right times bullet speed. So we're firing this positively on the x-axis. So in this direction. So we're shooting at ourselves. So we're going to say minus bullet speed. So file, save. So now it's going to fire in this direction. So it should fire towards us now. So we've set our rate of fire. So let's increase or decrease our rate of fire. Let's say every 1 second. So now it's going to fire more frequently. And then let's restrict our range. Let's say a range of 3. So now I'm outside the range. So let's see if I can move within range. So now I'm in range, and now I'm out of range. In range, out of range. Let's give this bullet a proper speed so it'll knock me over when it hits me. Okay, yep, that definitely tried to knock me over. Okay, so we can see here that we can change our rate of fire, the range, and our bullet speed, have all these things work together. So the next stage, which we're not going to do today in class, what we're going to do is we're going to start using all this sort of technology here. So we have ascertained the distance between two objects, and then we were getting this to instantiate an object and fire it in a given direction based on that distance. It has a rate of fire. So we're going to use all this, and then the next step is to add in a UI, so to add in a user interface that maybe we'll give ourselves some health, maybe put a timer in so that we can kind of get from one end of our level to another, and start having a think about turning it more into a game. So that's what we'll be doing next. So thank you for watching.